Okay, perfect. So, hi everybody. Thank you for joining us this morning, afternoon, noon, evening. I don't even know. I think we have a whole bunch of people from all over. We're just going to wait one more minute before we hand it over to Henri to kick it off. But thank you for joining us. This is a super interesting topic. We've had lots and lots of positive feedback before even starting. So we're really looking forward, and thank you to the panelists and to Henri for taking time to do it. I'm going to pass it on to you. I think we can. In the interest of time, we have a hard stop, so let's get started.
We always do that. Thank you. As like crypto goes, crypto never sleeps, crypto never stops. And thank you very much, everybody, for joining again. Thank you very much, everybody. My name is Henri Arslanian, and my passion in life is the future of finance and money. I wear many hats. I'm from teaching crypto university. I'm a senior advisor at PwC, where I used to be the global crypto leader. Now working on launching a crypto hedge fund. So very, very active in the space for many years, and very honored to be moderating the panel today. And of course, a member of Life for many, many years as well. Today, we have a very, very exciting topic. We're going to talk about really on Web3, NFTs in the metaverse, what you need to know. And my goal today is very, very simple. It's really to really go deep dive in some of these issues, share the latest developments we're seeing, and hopefully empower you with this information, and then let you make your own decision on what the impact could be on your business, on what you're doing professionally, on a financial side, but also for you as an individual as well, on that perspective as well. And to do this, we have a dream team panel today to really go into these topics today. One of them, first of all, ladies first, as always, we have Vanessa Grellet, who's the head of portfolio growth at coinfund.io. And one thing you may not know about Vanessa, a part of the whole investing she does in crypto, when she was young, she wanted to be a fashion designer. And as a kid, she also used to be an equestrian and do jumping and play polo before, of course, she discovered crypto and her life's changed. Vanessa, great to have you with us today on this live event.
Thanks for having me.
The second is Yannick Folla. Yannick is the head of DataHub at Figment, a great company that we'll talk about today. One thing you may not know about Yannick is that he started the first NFT gallery in Canada. So here we go. We'll talk about NFTs today. We'll talk about gallery, but great example of pretty cool stuff. Yannick, great to have you with us today as well.
Thanks for having me.
And last but not least, Mr. Marc Ziade, who's a director at Segment Solutions at Mastercard. And one thing you may not know about Marc, by the way, a part of all great work he's doing at Mastercard, his hobby is programming. Again, very exciting, and he's massive foodie. Travels around the world for food, and his latest big favorite now is barbecue and meat. So here we go. I think a lot of stuff to do there. Yeah, Marc, great to have you with us today.
Great to be here.
So let's jump in right in, guys. There's obviously a lot of topic today. I promise you, we're going to try to make it insightful, interesting, and most importantly, exciting. And to kick it off, there's a couple of big topics I want to discuss today. One of them is what's happening with Web3, the metaverse developments. I really share with our audience what's happening there. Of course, then we'll talk about NFTs as well, and we'll talk about verticals as well. One key thing for everybody listening to this at home, if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat, the Q&A of Zoom. And during the course of the discussion, I'll make sure to bring them in as we get along. So we'll keep it dynamic from that perspective. Let's kick it off with you, Yannick. Actually, obviously, before we talk about Web3 and where we are, can you maybe, for the benefit of our audience, give us a quick, where we are with Web3? What is the current state of Web3? What are the big developments, especially on the stack of where we are? So hopefully can be a good introduction for our audience on the topic.
Sure, a golden question, I guess. Well, obviously, Web3 adoption has been rising really quickly. 2021 saw the rise of NFTs, which kind of caught the attention of the mainstream audience, which allowed more people to understand crypto, play with crypto. We always see these kinds of different waves with new use cases that come up that are very important for people to understand the value of decentralized applications. From a development standpoint, there's two major topics that the audience should be aware of. One is applications are going multi-chain, and the other is the transposition of the tech stack to decentralized technologies. So I'll touch on multi-chain first. At the beginning of Web3, people were building applications only on a single chain, only on Ethereum, only on Solana, for example. But now we're seeing dApps being at a point where they can scale their user base horizontally without needing to actually build out new features or grow their app stack. They can actually launch the same application on a new chain, essentially catching an audience that was not present in their previous ecosystems, like on Ethereum. So as an app, what we're seeing is people start on Ethereum, then they want to scale. They want to make their app faster, better for their users. They go to Ethereum scaling solutions like Polygon, like Phantom, like Arbitrum. And then they start looking into ways to go and capture different ecosystems that have never interacted with Ethereum, going into Cosmos, going into Solana, going into Polkadot, going into Near. So we're kind of seeing that horizontal scale. And now we have some of the top dApps out there that are now on 7, 8 different chains. So just
what's the impact of that? Yannick, sorry to interrupt you, but what is the impact of having something that used to be on Solana now that is multi-chain?
Well, the main point, I think, is that blockchains are not siloed. It is not, I think, the right framework to think about chains as competing against each other. Apps will capture value across chains, across whole of Web3. So it's less about Ethereum versus Solana. It's more about how to build in both. So that's, and also for the user base, what that means is as a user in the next 2-3 years, it won't matter if you're a Solana user, if you're an Ethereum user, you're going to be able to access the same applications across the board. You're always going to have, I'd say, niche applications that will be only on one chain or another, but generally speaking, just like the internet, everything's going to be interconnected. 2, what we're seeing is the decentralization of the tech stack. So devs build applications in Web3 the same way they used to build in Web2. People need storage, people need indexing, people need databases, people need data streams. In Web2, obviously, these were all centralized solutions, using a Postgres database, using S3 buckets for storage, using centralized indexers running on your own database. But now we're seeing kind of the rise of decentralized protocols that tackle these layers of technology. What that means is instead of relying on a centralized database to get information about your application, now you can actually rely on a protocol like the Graph, which allows you to get specific information about your smart contract. If you want to store media files for your NFTs, when you create NFTs, you can use decentralized storage to make sure that these files will always be accessible and always stored so that people know that their NFTs are not going away, for example. So I'm excited about the growth of that tech stack where, every quarter, every year, we're seeing more and more of these layers of technologies being decentralized.
So actually, let me pass it to you, Vanessa. On this point, right? I think Yannick mentioned 2 interesting points, right? One is the ecosystem is becoming multi-chain. Maybe for the benefit of our audience as well, this is a big evolution we saw the last couple of months, where initially people will just build on Ethereum, just build on Solana, and now we're having this cross-chain ecosystem. Vanessa, as an investor, what does that mean? I know a lot of our audience actually are investors in crypto. They're either long Solana or Algorand or Tezos or whatever, or Ethereum and whatever they're investing in. Does that have an impact on how we should look from as an investor on some of these protocols? And second, linked also to Yannick's question, on the stack of DeFi, how does it impact as an investor when you look at some of these developments going on?
Yeah, so at CoinFund, we also adhere to the thesis of a multi-chain world. And we've invested in a lot of the layer ones, whether it be Ethereum, Solana, Definity, Polkadot. And so we know the ecosystems well, and we're really excited to see that now, the chain or the project that will win will be linked to the user experience rather than, arguing on scalability and security. And I think that's a big shift. And so from a investor perspective, we're still looking always for extraordinary teams who can execute that strategy, right? At all levels and on any chain, but their capabilities to incentivize and capture TVL and their consumers is going to be key in the future in how we assess the teams and in their capacity to win. Then if you're talking about so decentralization of the web stack, I think this is one of my favorite topics. Obviously, we invested in the graph, we invested in Ceramic, which focuses on data and identity. And, you know, we're looking to projects like that are, you know, looking at every layer and seeing if we can bring a decentralized solution, which is for us a more sustainable and long-term solution than, you know, Web2 applications that just capture value for not the users, but the owners. And so that's really the revolution here. And so those shared infrastructure that are decentralized are a key component of our investment thesis. And we're always looking for every layer, every component that we can be, that doesn't need to be owned by just one entity.
Very interesting. Actually, I'll come back about some of the challenges I think you face while you're doing at this. But I want to first move it on to Marc. You know, obviously, we talk about the stack, the Web3, what we're seeing on the decentralized ecosystems. How does Mastercard? It's probably, you know, I wouldn't call it legacy, but obviously one of the traditional financial services providers, to be very polite, right? How does a corporate look at Web3? How, as anybody else working at a bank, and many of the people on the line today, how, for example, you think people should look at Web3 and the centralized ecosystem, and actually in particular Mastercard? How does Mastercard look at Web3 ecosystems?
Yeah, I'm actually going to use your question, Henri, to talk a little bit about the difference between Metaverse and Web3, because I think it also informs how corporations look at it. And more importantly, I think, you know, probably a lot of people are you know, asking the question of what is actually the Metaverse, right? How do you define this Metaverse thing? And especially that it became a buzzword a little bit recently. So I think, you know, when you look at Metaverse and Web3, obviously there is a great overlap, but also there are some slight differences. And I'll explain a little bit, you know, how I see it basically evolving. And to kind of look at, you know, defining that, you have to go back and look at some of the trends that have been evolving over the past years that have to do with the technology stack, but also with the user behavior, right? So in terms of the technology stack, the metaverse, as you know, people theoretically define it, is made up of a couple of layers. There's the hardware layer, which is basically, you know, you could think about the VR applications and AR, but also your mobile phone, you know, the platforms that are typically, you know, usually launching applications in a Web2 format today, but eventually will transition into this metaverse format. You have the networking layer or the network connectivity layer, which is, you know, with 5G is progressing, but also is still lacking a little bit behind. And it's very important to have like real-time immersive experiences in the metaverse. Then you have the computing layer, which is obviously computing power. And then you have a couple of layers that are closer to Web3, which are the experience layer, whether it's like immersive VR experiences, but also NFT-based type of experiences and customer engagement and loyalty. You have the payment layer, where obviously cryptocurrencies and stablecoins will play a big part. You have the content layer, where NFTs could you know, play a part, but also just generally user-generated content in traditional platforms. And then finally, you have the protocol layer in terms of like the standards to kind of make the whole thing interoperable. And looking at all these layers, you can see that they've been progressing over time, right? Probably at different pace, but they're starting to converge, you know, in the past years to eventually form what we call kind of the next version of the internet, which is what we call the metaverse. So it doesn't exist, at least today, theoretically in the way we see it, but there are definitely some early applications of it. And then if you look at gaming as a segment, that's actually the interesting part, is that gaming is probably the most advanced across all of these layers, right? And so a lot of people consider gaming to be actually the best entry point to the metaverse. And that's actually the second trend I want to get into, because gaming has been evolving, you know, tremendously over the past 20 years, even more than 20 years. And it's today the largest form of entertainment. It's the fastest growing form of entertainment, like bigger than music, bigger than movies. And it is basically pretty like diversified, like everyone games. You have 3 billion gamers worldwide. They're equally distributed across gender, age groups, you know, income levels. So it's like, it's a massive segment that is like touching everyone's life pretty much. And it's been increasingly social. So it's not anymore about playing the game. It's about like connecting with friends, making friends online, watching other people, streaming, and all of that. So it's like a social experiment. It's not anymore just about the game itself. And then when you try to extrapolate this to other aspects of our life, right, you can see how the same trend is starting to replicate in the way we do work, in the way we just interact with people online, and obviously accelerated by COVID. There's a very interesting stat that was published, I think, by ARK Invest, and they basically estimated that in 2021, users spent an average of 40% of their free time online and 60% offline. And they project by 2030, this will flip. So you can imagine, like, by 2030, we'll be spending more than half our time online. And this is like, this by itself, some people argue, is actually the metaverse, this flippening of averages.
Absolutely.
And so obviously you can see that the user behavior is actually driving a lot of that, right? So that's the second trend. And then the third trend, looking at Web3 specifically, you can see how, looking back at Web 1 and Web 2, Web 1 started in a way decentralized, right? Like people could host a server and power up the internet from their houses, but then quickly moved to a centralized version, mostly because of the monetization question, like how do we actually monetize this? And the model that emerged back then was this ad-based business model. And this concept of walled garden companies that harness customer data to monetize it. And I think in general, even looking at that trend, there was a study made by the National Research Group, I think, in the US that shows that 50% of customers are not happy with Web 2, and they have privacy concerns, but still 10% still don't understand what Web 3 is trying to do. So there's obviously a gap in terms of like getting there, but you can also see that trend in terms of like what Web 3 is trying to do, which is basically trying to get the best of Web 1, which was decentralization, and the best of Web 2, which was unlocking value in a way that enable open economies and open ownership. And this is why you see primitives like NFTs, DeFi, DAOs, and all of that. And so all this to say is that, if you look at those three trends and the way they've been evolving, you kind of start to realize that this is a natural evolution of where we're trying to get to in terms of this metaverse concept. And you can see how essential the Web3 part is in all of that, even though it's not all of it, but it's definitely the layer that would drive interoperability, digital ownership, digital identity across all these platforms and across all these experiences.
Super, Marc. I'm going to come back on the gaming element in a second. Before I just want to touch on the point you just mentioned right now is kind of the layer that brings together a lot of these different ecosystems are decentralized, right? And maybe I'll bring you in, Yannick, on this, because obviously, and I think it's a good time to talk about Figment as well on this, because how do you think corporates, like let's say people on the line today just heard what Marc said, right? We're going in this ecosystem, and we'll talk about gaming in a second. But how do you think corporates can play on a role on this, or financial institutions, and based on what this trend that we are seeing right now on the Web3 ecosystem?
So I see corporation starting to make their way into Web3. Usually the path is very similar even for application devs. So you start with a niche use case that will require just one layer of technology, which is your networking layer, kind of your blockchain servers. You start querying data from those chains, you start submitting your first transactions, and then you start understanding your user base, understanding the technology that you can actually leverage, and then you go deeper into your development in that decentralization path. I would say, it's a very wide question in the sense that every company will have a different interest in the metaverse. We've been seeing banks, for example, and fashion firms actually launch metaverse offices, which is kind of their first foray into the space, to understand it, to interact with its users as well. Others are integrating crypto within their platforms so that their users can actually safely interact with crypto within their already established platform. Some firms are starting to look into NFTs. I think Tiffany's of all the freaking brands have launched an NFT collection and a token. So I think it's either going to be through NFTs for brand and media, integration of crypto within their existing platform, or launching in the metaverse to have a presence there to say that they're ready for that next wave. And then obviously, depending on the use cases, it will vary, but that's what we're seeing.
It's not easy. I can tell you one of my things I did for PwC was literally PwC bought land on Sandbox, which is a metaverse ecosystem. And I can tell you, you guys can just imagine the lovely conversations we had behind the scenes to convince some legacy folks about why we're buying virtual land in a virtual ecosystem. So that's one day for conversations around drinks. But actually, I want to talk about one thing that Marc mentioned about the gaming industry. Actually, I recorded a podcast last night with Paul Dawalibi, actually another Life member. It's for those interested, again, again, it's on my podcast called The Future of Money, where we discuss about the convergence of gaming and crypto. As you mentioned, there's 3 billion gamers. The amount of people invest right now in spending gaming is bigger than the music industry, movies industry, and others, right? So it's absolutely phenomenal from that perspective. Vanessa, from your perspective as an investor, when you're seeing this convergence of gaming and crypto, first, do you believe it's happening? And second, how do you think people should look at this as an investor, either for their PA personal trading or even as a strategy for their business?
Yeah, it's certainly happening, and there's a lot of excitement, maybe too much excitement around that. So it can get a little bit frothy to identify. It's hard to identify where the real opportunities are, but we're still at the beginning of that, and I think investments will come to fruition in a couple of years because right now the gaming experience is very high with Web 2 resolution and technology. And if you want to create a native crypto gaming, the experience is a little bit clunky. So there's a few aspects where we can try to integrate NFTs into existing games. We can create new games. We're really focused on sort of the picks and shovels and where there are tools that are being created to bridge Web 2 and Web 3 in the gaming space. And I think we're still early. Yep. However, there's a lot of teams that are starting to build there. And so I would be cautious right now into really trying to figure out what are the best investments, because, we do not ambition to pick like the exact game winners. That's not where our expertise lies. So we're not investing in gaming studios or specific games. Mm-hmm. That being said, we've seen with the play to earn sort of developments that there are new ways to engage people through token economics and Web3 tools. So we're pretty excited about that. And then any infrastructures that allows you to, use NFTs, interact with NFTs in the gaming world, have, several platforms interoperate is something that's really interesting to us.
Absolutely. I think, I think there's like you said, the quality of gaming right now on Web 2 with all the gaming studios we know is exceptionally good, as anybody who's played a video game recently knows. And what you're seeing right now in these decentralized ecosystems, it's frankly, it's terrible, right? It's very, very clunky. Saying it's clunky is a very diplomatic and polite word, right? So I think we have a long way to go. And even models that we're seeing like play to earn, I think there's a lot of folks on the earning side, not on the playing side. So I think that's whole new other podcast or session on this on topic. But I just want to talk about gaming.
I also want to say that you want to find a way to engage the gaming community in an authentic way. And so one of the issues or the tensions that have emerged is that, players come here to play and they're not looking automatically to make a profit or to be incentivized. So the projects that will win will be the ones who can combine both the token economic side and really the fun side of gaming and have people spend their time there.
Henri, if I might add
of course,
just a small point. So a big fan of ceramic as well, also invested in the round. I think ceramic is actually going to be one of the most important pieces for Web3 gaming because it offers a decentralized database, which all games will be able to connect to. And hence now players will not be siloed to a certain game, whether avatars or achievements or skins or NFTs. They will be able to move around from one game to another and transpose their success from one ecosystem to another, using that technology. So I think that's probably the coolest thing about Web3 gaming is that, if you're spending 100 hours a week on Fortnite, you can't do anything else with your achievements in Web 2. But if you were to do that in Web 3, you'd actually be able to be recognized and that value would be transposed to any game you would go to because of that technology.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a very, very key point, right? I mean, the asset ownership that happens in these games. I mean, we mentioned Fortnite, many of these games, actually, some of the assets people own are actually quite valuable. So, interesting point. I teach crypto university for many years, and I ask the students at the beginning of the course, what is the biggest asset they have? You'll be surprised in many cases, a lot of students tell me the video game assets is the biggest asset they have. These are obviously people in their early 20s, right? But I think it's very interesting. We often forget that as we go a bit older on that side. Marc, I want to bring you back in, talk about another, we talk about gaming, but about NFTs. Of course, NFTs, there's a lot of chatter about this, and we'll talk about it later today. But what's your view on what we're seeing with NFTs right now? Do you think we're at the phase where it's still a bubble, it's a craziness, or you think some of the conversation and the investment going in NFTs is actually justified from that perspective?
Yeah. That's a really good question. And just before I answer this, I just want to go back to the play to earn, comment that Vanessa made, because I think it's a really good point. And I think one thing to put things into perspective is that game developers have been for years designing games in a closed economy, right? And obviously play to earn is like opening up this economy across the ecosystem. And it's very challenging to find the right balance between focusing on the user and focusing on, investors and speculators and value. But anyway, to answer your question about NFTs, I mean, it's definitely a bubble in some ways. I'm not sure if the bubble ended or not, but there's obviously a lot of hype and a lot of buzz around it. But at the same time, it's also a new concept that is unlocking a new way to build communities, to engage with customers and to build customer loyalty, and just even to gamify experiences. Like an example of that, I don't know if you guys saw that, but like, the FTX partnership with Tomorrowland to gamify, music festivals. That's just like an amazing way of, using NFTs that has a real utility. So I think it's definitely here to stay. I think the concept has a lot of legs and has a lot of utility if applied the right way. But I also think a lot of people, are just experimenting still in the space. And with experiments, obviously you have high percentages of failures. And obviously, this is why, it could be a bubble. There's obviously a lot of scams and frauds, right? So, being cautious and taking all precautions is necessary. But then if I compare this to like the ICO bubble, right, in 2017, 2017 was still early days. It was mostly speculative. Very few projects had utility. And eventually, the bubble crashed, as we all know. I think today there is more utility that is emerging. Obviously, there is slightly more regulation. There is definitely more institutional interest. When you see companies like HSBC buying land in Sandbox or JPM in Decentralisation and so on and so on. And then even like you could already see some of the mainstream adoption, right? When you see brands starting to think about that, Nike acquiring an NFT, fashion company, Adidas kind of dropping their NFT, collection and these type of things. So I think eventually probably 95% of these NFT projects will probably fail, but the 5% that will survive are actually going to build basically the foundation for a lot of the experiences and concepts that this crypto primitive will eventually unlock. It's very interesting because Vanessa mentioned before this call the blockchain developer bootcamp that we did in Lebanon back in 2018, and during that time when I was organizing this, like I remember very well. People, when you used to mention that to people, they used to look at you and like, is this guy crazy? Like, is he part of some crypto cult or something? Like, no one really took you seriously back then. And I was in Lebanon like a couple of months ago, and I can tell you, like, the amount of people that know about NFTs and want to discuss crypto and blockchain is just amazing. Like, it definitely crossed into mainstream, at least from trying to understand the business application of the concept. Probably not the technology yet. And I think, it's here to stay. I think, we're going to see in the coming, 3 to 5 years, a lot of new applications with great utility coming out of it, regardless of whether, what we're seeing today is a bubble that is going to crash or not. Eventually it will kind of correct itself. And from there, you see real life applications.
Absolutely. I think we'll come back to Lebanon in a second. I think you're absolutely right how it's being mainstream. I'm currently in Dubai, actually, and the Dubai police just announced that they're going to do their own NFT drop, which is absolutely crazy. And even the UK government came up with a statement this week that they want to do an NFT drop this summer. This is the UK Treasury. Again, just to put things in perspective, right? And even we had in Ukraine last week at the war with basically Ukrainian government was looking at launching NFTs, right? To launch. So it's very interesting from that perspective. Actually, before I move on to Yannick, for anybody on the call, by the way, if you have any questions, feel free to ask them in the question button or whatever we have, and I'll make sure to answer them as well. And actually, let's talk about Yannick, I want to get your take. I mean, the data, if I look at the data right now, there's been actually a pretty big drop in NFT volumes, at least, right? I mean, still, there was almost 7 billion, it's actually 6.8 billion to be precise, in NFTs that were traded last month, right? This is a drop from the 15 billion that we hit 2 months ago, but it's still, I mean, significant amount of money that is taking place in the space. What's your view, Yannick? I mean, as somebody who has a computer science background, a business background, what's your view on the state of the economy, the crypto NFT space right now? But also, what's your view on the potential of what Marc mentioned? There's a lot of crime. There's obviously money laundering going on crypto, on NFTs. Let's face it, wash trading and the likes. What do you think on that perspective?
Sure. So people are still chasing profit and quick flips. The top NFT collections are still, and are actually at all-time highs. If you look at apes, if you look at clones, Azukis, for example. So it's definitely not that. Where we've seen a big drop is in the volume for crypto art. So not avatars, not wearables, but actual art. Artists have been less successful recently. Because right now the NFT enthusiasts are gamblers. They're there to flip every new project and to bet on these new PFBs, which is a shame because, well, at the end of the day, the art has value. Flipping avatars is not super sustainable and has a lot of, I'd say, parallels with the ICO boom, with the tech boom as well in the 2000s. So I would say it's still there, but not as healthy as it used to be. I think there will be a heavy correction eventually. People need to, unfortunately, get hurt to learn, kind of root out that gambling mentality and then get back to the real value of those primitives, because there is tremendous value in NFTs, just like there is tremendous value in tokens and in the internet. But you always have to go through that speculative bubble to finally understand its real value and value the right way. I would say on the art side, it's selling less, but also the valuations are pretty crazy. You can buy a sculpture of Salvador Dali for 30K. You will have a hard time finding a unique piece of okay artists and super rare for around 30K. I think there is right now hardship around understanding how to value crypto art, because crypto art has a lot of advantage versus traditional art, whether it's in liquidity and distribution and the ability to be able to learn about an artist and see his art in a much better way than local galleries, distribution, provenance, and royalties for artists. But what is that premium? Are we talking 2x the value of an equivalent traditional art piece, 4x? Are we talking 50% equal? That is unknown. Anybody who says that they know the exact value of crypto art versus traditional art in 5 years is crazy, in my opinion. So I think the market is trying to assess that right now. So that's for the value piece.
Absolutely. Sorry to interrupt you.
No, I wanted to let
what you're mentioning is very interesting, because obviously, and absolutely right, you're giving the Salvador Dali example, but I think just to give some metrics to our audience, you have a lot of these big, CryptoPunks, Bored Ape Yacht Club, some of the original, if you want, a big popular NFTs, where the floor price now is almost $300,000-$400,000. Again, and this is a thing that didn't exist a couple months ago. You have newborn artists that are now becoming, very popular with NFTs, and there's definitely been a disconnect. I think there's also, to be fair, a lot of pros for artists, right? Beforehand, the galleries used to control the show, like they were kind of the pimps in the space, right? An artist would sell the piece. And now the beauty with NFTs is obviously royalties that come back to the artists. I just bought a piece I bought the first Armenian NFT, for example, and for a lifetime, if I sell my NFT, the artist will get 7.5% of my sell value forever, right? I think so there's a lot of these benefits you see from that perspective as well. That's quite interesting. I want to bring it to you, Vanessa. Obviously, Yannick just mentioned the valuation of these NFTs, right? And I know you've been very involved in the space. From your perspective as an investor, how do you see the NFT market? And do you think it's sustainable? And how do you see some of the original collections? We mentioned CryptoPunks and others, and some of the super rares that Yannick mentions are more popular. They're more recent, let's say.
Yeah, CoinFund was an early investor in NFT infrastructure, and our founder Jake is also an artist, and so he also does generative arts and sells his collections. And this year we created a company called Metaverse, that focuses on purchasing iconic NFTs and NFTs where we think the staying value will be. And
what are those? What are NFTs you think with the staying power?
So think about different categories of NFTs and what NFTs will be in the future. So you have the PFPs, you have.
Let's explain what PFP is, by the way. It's like profile pictures, right? So people put as a profile picture.
So NFTs that you can use or that look like someone or an animal or anything that you could identify to, or a community that you would want to be associated with. And so people use that in their social media profile, and it shows you belonging to a community, a certain, of course, price point at which this PFP is associated with, and therefore you are associated with. So it's a very interesting evolution of NFTs because it shows sort of the social media aspect and the power of the community. And then we have, more traditional art NFTs or generative art NFTs, which are super exciting. And, we look at features like, historical relevance, the number of community and followers, the velocity at which these trade, and also sort of the artistic quality or the artist that is behind them. So is it a well-known generative artist that has a big following that like in traditional art, there will be a lot of demand. So that's the second bucket. And the third bucket is like the more the collectibles. And there, if you think about that, these are low value items, but that trade with a lot of velocity. And so there are trading strategies around that. And there's short-term and long-term, obviously, depending on where your perspective is. What is exciting is that anyone can be an investor there, depending on the price point. Like there's no barrier to entry. Information is transparent, ownership is transparent, trading tools are pretty accessible to everyone. So it's a very dynamic market, but we do see that, large pieces and where a lot of value is created stays within a smaller number of the participants in the market.
Exactly.
So you do need to be careful and really try to understand the dynamic of each community to understand the value of the items.
I think one patent mentioning for me, for a lot of audiences as well, it's easy to trade NFTs, right? It takes a click of a button. If I buy a painting of my favorite Lebanese artist, it's physically, you have to go sell it, resell it. It's definitely more, there's friction in that trade, right? Whereas NFTs, you can literally buy and sell and flip them 10 times a day, no problem, right?
24/7.
Yeah, exactly. Before I want to talk about the issue of money laundering as well in this issue, but I want to bring up to Yannick, because Yannick, one thing we mentioned about you people don't know is the fact that you launched your first NFT gallery in Canada. Want to hear more about that? And then second is when we're going to have that in Lebanon. That's my next question.
So, this quick story is I started collecting crypto art in January 2021. By March, I had top 60th collection of all time on Super Rare, and I figured
just on this point, right? You realize, like, so you start collecting in January 2021. In a couple of months, you were like top collector. Like, it just doesn't happen in traditional pieces.
Hard. Indeed. So the market was too small, and artists didn't understand. More traditional artists didn't understand the space. There was like 500 real active collectors in the crypto art space. So I figured the best way for this industry to grow is to provide education. So started Xerox Society, the NFT gallery. We are a nonprofit organization where all the profits from the sales of the artworks that are in our exhibitions go to a grant program that we run, where we're onboarding Canadian artists to the NFT space, paying all their minting fees, listing fees, weekly workshops, and so on. We also transpose our exhibitions in a metaverse. So every exhibition that we have are interconnected and kept forever in the metaverse, and also built an academy. So that people can freely consume content about the NFT space, whether they're an artist or a collector. So kind of a
collector
hobby.
Before traditional art, out of curiosity, Yannick?
So actually funny, never really cared about art until I found NFTs. For me, the digital art medium spoke to me. It was kind of a great gateway for me into art, and now I'm also a big traditional art collector. So NFTs led me to traditional art, which is pretty funny.
But see, this is important. I was having this debate with my traditional Lebanese dad, trying to explain to him that, like this, he doesn't understand why people want to collect something digital that they cannot hang on their wall. Like we had the same discussions on cryptocurrencies, as you can imagine. But it's very interesting, Yannick. This is, I think where you're very happy and comfortable to hold something digitally as well. And you were not a collector before. So actually, when I talk about this to art galleries and people in the traditional world, I actually tell them that the pot becomes bigger, the pie becomes bigger. Like Yannick, you would not be at a Sotheby's auction in the traditional world or an art gallery, whereas you are now right now. So the pot has become bigger as well. But
I think it's easier if you don't have a framework.
Yeah.
If you already come from the traditional art world, you have some mindset that's already established about how to think about art. When you arrive with a naive mind and you're open to it, then you don't have these preconceptions. You can actually think about the real value of it. I really like to use the example of, well, I'll get to it, but essentially for traditional art, people are used to the ability to own the piece is tied to the ability to enjoy it. If you own the piece, you're the one that can see it. Digital art, you're splitting those apart. A single person can own it, but everybody can enjoy it. It can be shared freely everywhere online. And so I like to use the example of the Mona Lisa as the most valuable artwork in the world, not because Da Vinci is the most accomplished artist or because it's the most beautiful artwork in the world, but it's been the most seen in person, photographed, shared on social media, shared in movies. Mm-hmm. With acknowledgement of a piece and of an artist's work grows the recognition of that artist, and hence the value and the temptation of acquiring a piece from that artist. With digital art, you explode, that distribution factor, because as an artist, you are your own self-marketer and you have a global audience. You're not tied to a local gallery, a local auction house. You have a power to be known by the whole world in a week, a month, instead of 10 years.
And that actually is big, right? Somebody who's in Beirut, an artist now, can be discovered by the entire world on that side. But Yannick, and I'll bring you, Marc, on this as well. Like, what do you guys think? Don't you believe, of course, there's genuine collectors like you, right, who enjoy the piece of art, but don't you think there's a lot of criminal activity as well? Money laundering, let's call it criminal, but let's say money laundering activity going on. If I buy a painting at $1 million and I resell it to you for $10 million, in traditional world, beauty is in the eye of the beholder, right? So there's obviously a lot of money laundering that was taking place in this case. In crypto, of course, it makes it 10 times easier, right? As a collector, Yannick, do you see there's a concentration risk? A few people are holding a lot of NFTs, but don't you think there's also a lot of illicit activity taking place with NFTs?
Two pieces to that answer. First, new entrants into the crypto space are very prompt to be phished, to be attacked, to be scammed, because they don't have the same kind of security mindset as someone that's been in crypto a long time. So you see a lot of people getting their NFTs stolen because they trust someone on Discord, for example, or Telegram or Twitter, where they think he's an admin, he's the creator of the collection, but he's just an impersonator. That happens very often. Also, people clicking on fake links and essentially giving access to their wallet. So PSYOPs will be very, very important for the NFT space to grow. Then on the wash trading and money laundering aspect, as you mentioned very clearly, in the traditional art world, you see the same thing, but actually worse, because there's no provenance. So actually, galleries will inflate the collector base of the previous collector base of an artwork to now double its price, for example. We're seeing similar things, not on the provenance side, but we are definitely seeing people selling an artwork at a certain price to themselves, to different wallets, and the wallets are pseudonymous. You don't know who's buying it. So if suddenly an artist has sold a piece for 100 Ether, then you're like, oh shit, maybe I should consider it. So that's something that you see out there, and if you don't really do your research, you might fall for these kinds of trends. You also see some wash trading, so on not necessarily art, but just for NFTs in general, where people will trade back and forth NFTs between themselves to show high volume for the collection. And then people are like, oh my God, this is booming. People are trading it. Let me buy into it. So these are the aspects to consider.
The beauty, though, to be fair, is that we're able to see this. We trace it, right? Like we know if there's wash trading going on. We can see people are buying and selling, which we cannot do with legacy or like traditional art, on that perspective. Marc, what's your view on this? On like, first of all, about the nefarious activities we just discussed with Yannick, but also there's a great question from Nicolas on this, on Nicolas Croyati on what is the impact? Can regulations have a role on this, right? And how do you, how do you think we can deal with this?
Yeah. So I definitely agree with what Yannick mentioned. And I think to add to your point, actually, that's something I wanted to talk about. Money laundering networks have existed since forever, right? Whether it was used to be done through cash or other tools or art, or, it's been around, and it will probably always stay around, right? The thing about crypto is that, like you said, you can trace it. And it actually provides the tools to fight it in a better way, even though those tools might not be as developed today or as used today, but eventually they will be. And there are companies who specialize in that, right? So at Mastercard, we have a company called CipherTrace that we acquired that focuses on that. Chainalysis is one of the leading companies doing that. And even though they're not maybe focused on NFTs today, because they're probably getting a lot of demand just in general about cryptocurrency transactions, but eventually they will be, or other companies will emerge and will be focused on that. And I think there are a lot of tools and data analytics model that you can use to trace it back and try to identify what's going on. The second piece, I think, regulations help for sure. I mean, it obviously depends on the type of regulation and what the regulation actually entails. But in general, for crypto adoption to become more and more mainstream, there needs to be some form of consumer protection in place. And I think regulations help bring that, kind of security or guarantee that, we will get there. And so basic measures from like KYC or AML up to, just general consumer protections are definitely, I think, in my opinion, helpful in that regard. Now, what I'm really interested in when it comes to crypto is actually, compliance and security, but not in the traditional way, in the blockchain way, right? And so things like zero knowledge proofs in that regard are really exciting concepts and exciting projects that
let's just explain what it is, right? For audiences, zero knowledge proof, ZK rollup, it allows you to actually know an answer without knowing the data. So it tells me, is this Marc Ziade? I get a yes or no without knowing that it's him, for example, right?
Exactly.
Continue, Mike. Just want to make that thing on.
Yeah, thank you. And so this has the added benefit of basically verifying or authenticating someone without getting access to their data, right? And I think that by itself, I mean, this is a huge innovation in my opinion. And whenever it's ready, I think will unlock a lot of not only mainstream adoption, but also kind of regulatory innovation on to how to treat those topics and how to preserve consumer privacy, but also provide some form of consumer protection at the same time.
And so, Vanessa, on your side, I mean, obviously, on Nicholas's question, we think that is regulations I think are going to help the space, and most importantly, do you think we'll have institutional investors look at NFTs as they're doing for crypto now?
Yeah, we already have actually, and some sort of trading firms and market makers are gearing up to support that. So we'll see it in two different ways. We'll see enterprise and institutions, as foundations have NFTs as part of their art collection and as part of their, engagement with their customers. And so they'll have to hold NFTs in their books. And then we see, large funds that are going to be trading NFTs and that are preparing. And we already have specialized funds that only trade NFTs. So it's coming and it'll grow bigger.
And actually, yesterday, you guys probably saw this, but HSBC announced, a Metaverse fund, right? So I think even like the traditional legacy financial institutions are even getting there, over time.
Yeah, for the private banking clients, interestingly, and I know there's a lot of people from life work at HSBC, no disrespect, don't take it personally, but as an organization that was very anti-crypto, frankly, closed the accounts of many crypto founders, and not only company, but the founders, the recent investment they did in crypto, and now this high network product they want to offer is going to be very interesting on that side. One last question before we move to a fireside question. And again, if anybody has questions, feel free to chip in, is basically on the Lebanon, right? Obviously we're live, so we got to talk about this. What do you think? Obviously, we discussed today all the Web3 developments, NFTs, Metaverse. What do you think, especially in the, let's say, current circumstances that we're in Lebanon? how do you think crypto can help? And maybe I'll kick off with you, Marc, and we'll go afterwards.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think there are many ways crypto can help. One way is allowing basically Lebanese talent who's still in Lebanon to, get involved in, global and international projects in the blockchain space. And it's a pretty, open and accessible space. You can, obviously, number one, education courses are accessible pretty much everywhere today, which was not the case back in 2017, 2018. Second of all, it's pretty easy to get in touch with blockchain communities. Like you could, go on Discord, go on Reddit, even crypto Twitter, and you can probably get involved and work and get bounties for your work and get paid and all of that. So there was a lot that can be done in terms of building some form of local economy of crypto and blockchain talent that could take part in the just broader blockchain workforce. The second thing is in terms of store of value, which is obviously one of the main pain points today in Lebanon in terms of the devaluation of the currency and the limitations on the banking sector. And this is an interesting point because I don't recommend for people to put all their life savings into Bitcoin, for example. I think there should be some form of balance or some form of percentage they're comfortable with. But at the same time, they can use those financial assets to kind of diversify, first of all, and maybe even transfer money in a way that is more suitable for their needs, given the restrictions on transfers today in Lebanon. The third thing is and that's something I discussed with a couple of friends maybe 1 year or 2 years ago, is that the viability of having some form of stablecoin network where you could onboard key merchants on one side, and obviously you have the consumers on the other side. And as we all know, the Lebanese economy is mostly based on our huge expat community, right, sending money back to their families. And so you could probably create a network, right, with people sending money using that stable coin to their families, and families purchasing using that stable coin with specific merchants. Obviously you need to invest time and money to build this out, but it could be one of the great use cases for crypto, actually. So these are some of the ideas I think that could help. And I don't think it's very straightforward, except the first one, which is the talent piece. I think the second one, in terms of using crypto as a store of value, or even building some form of stable coin, a product to facilitate transactions, those are things that require obviously entrepreneurial endeavors to build them out, and obviously investment and so on. But I think if someone has the time and has the connections and has the energy to do it, I think it could be a great use case for crypto.
Yeah, definitely big opportunity on that side. So, guys, as we kick off, as we finish this, I'm gonna do my fire round suite of questions. I'm gonna ask really quick questions. I need basically 1 or 2 word answers on what I answer. I normally have a bell. I left it in the hotel, so I have my hand will be the bell who actually gives us the stops us on that. Hope you guys are ready. I'm gonna start from you, Vanessa. Vanessa, if you're not in crypto, what is the one other industry you'll be in?
Financial services.
Financial services.
It's going to be the same as crypto in a few years.
Yannick.
I don't think I could do something else in crypto.
Crypto for life.
I mean, okay. I'll give you something. I almost made a career in hockey management. I worked for the LA Kings when I was before college.
Here we go, man. I grew up in Montreal. I'm a Montreal Canadiens fan, but here we go. All roads lead to crypto. Marc,
likewise.
What's the one thing?
Yeah, so I'm very far from it, but Formula One has been a passion of mine. So being in that space would be probably exciting. Maybe gaming is the closest to it, I guess.
Absolutely, there's great gaming there. There you go. Next one. What is your favorite coin? A part of Bitcoin and Ethereum. You have to choose one coin. You have to put all your crypto assets in. What would it be? Vanessa.
Well, I worked for 5 years at Consensus, so I have to say Ethereum.
I second that.
Yeah, Marc, what do you do?
I mean, I have to say Ethereum. It's definitely my favorite across all of them. There's an interesting, blockchain project, which is Luna, or the stable coin, right? Yeah. That I think is interesting to look at. Yeah. So these would be kind of my answers, but definitely Ethereum.
Luna, we can have a whole session, especially that they're using Bitcoin as a standard right now. So we can talk about that separately. Marc, what is the one thing? What one coin?
You mean Yannick, right?
Yannick, I'm sorry. Yannick, sorry.
It's okay. I mean, I'm gonna be boring, but my first love was Ethereum. I put all my life
Oh
savings
my
into
God, everybody's
Ethereum in
bullish
2016.
Ethereum. Here we go.
So otherwise, I mean, hate it or love it. Hard to bet against the Solana team and FTX. That's a lot behind Solana's growth.
Here we go. A lot of
Yeah.
consensus on the today from the panel. It's like the sell side street on HSBC stocks. Again, no offense on the HSBC folks here. Okay, if you had to take a bet, I'm going to start this time from you, Marc, and then we're going to move to Yannick. If you had to take a bet, is Satoshi Nakamoto a man, a woman, and what country is he or she from? Marc.
Wow, I think it's a group of people. I don't think it's one person.
Where are they from?
Tough question. I'm not sure. Probably somewhere in Asia Pacific. Hard to locate a country.
Yannick.
But
I will go with Marc as well. It's a group, and I don't think it's a single region. I think there was definitely US people involved, but nothing points to not having people involved from the other side of the world as well. So group.
Vanessa.
Vanessa dropped.
Oh, sorry, I just dropped Vanessa. So let's continue on it. One other question: what is the one resource you recommend? Anybody on the line today wants to learn about crypto? What is the one resource you recommend they go learn about crypto? Marc.
Again, I'm going to be biased. Consensus Academy is a great one. But I also think just being on crypto Twitter and following like some of the key people and getting engaged in the conversation is probably the best way to learn. And personally, the best way I learned, in all honesty, is YouTube. Like, it was back in 2015. I just, started putting on those YouTube videos, and that's basically how I really understood what the technology is.
Self promo here. I have all my educational content. I was on YouTube and in Arabic as well. My channels, I have a couple channels in different languages in Arabic as well. So if you have people who could be interested, Yannick, on your side.
I like recommending as kind of a starting point in the research A16Z's Crypto Canon, which is like a collection of 150 blogs about everything important in crypto. If you're interested in the dev side of things, I'll be biased too. Figment, we launched back in late 2020, a decentralized education platform, which we're now running with Solana, the Graph, Ceramic, Pyth, and Arweave as a DAO. And essentially, it's people are paid to write a technical tutorial about how to build apps on blockchains. And those tutorials are free to consume.
Here we go. And last question as we finish this live event on Web3 NFTs in the metaverse. I'm sorry from you, Marc. Marc, if you could have lunch or dinner with one person, dead or alive, lunch or dinner with one person, dead or alive, who would you have lunch with?
Wow, this is a tough one. Vitalik.
Vitalik Buterin. Here we go. Founder of Ethereum. Yannick, if you could have lunch or dinner with one person, dead or alive.
I'm going with Marc. That's really a good question. Just to make it different, maybe Sam Bankman-Fried.
Of course.
Good one.
Yeah,
it'd be interesting.
That's I was just in the Bahamas last week. I went to the F office. It's very mind-blowing. But guys, thank you very much. This is a super panel. Thank you very much, not only to Yannick, Vanessa, and Marc, but also thanks to all of you at home. I know how your time is precious. Thank you for spending time for all of us to share our passion of the future of money with you all. And most importantly as well, thank you to Life and the Life community, not only for building this great ecosystem, but actually putting crypto on the agenda. Rania, I'll pass it back to you on that. And thank you very much, everybody, for being with us today.
Thank you all.
Perfect. Thank you very much, everybody.
Have a good day, guys.
Thank you, guys. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.